Close your eyes for a second. Not to picture anything, not to run through a technique, not to do anything at all. Just let them close. Let your breath slow down like you have nowhere else to be, because you do. Notice your body resting into the chair beneath you. Notice the plain fact that air moves in and out of you, in, out, without a single ounce of effort on your part. You are not commanding yourself to breathe. You are not reminding your heart to beat. The most vital functions keeping you alive right now are unfolding in total, effortless trust. And they always have been, every second of your life, with no struggle, no supervision, no need for you to manage them. Now open your eyes and sit with this question. If the very power that sustains your life works through complete surrender, if the intelligence running your body, building your cells, moving your blood through your veins, does all of that without any anxious help from you, then why on earth have you decided that reaching your desires demands a fight? Why have you convinced yourself that the same power capable of orchestrating something as staggeringly complex as a human being needs your worry to help it produce a relationship, a bank balance, a healed body, a different set of circumstances? Where did that idea even come from? Because tonight I want to propose something to you. Everything you've absorbed about hustle, about pushing harder, about grinding your way to what you want, every single bit of it is exactly upside down. And tonight, we're going to flip it right side up. Here's what most people have come to believe about creating the life they want. They believe it comes down to force. They believe that without pushing, without straining, without working themselves to exhaustion, they'll end up with nothing at all. That every desire has to be paid for in sweat. That the universe functions like some kind of strict employer, weighing your effort before it ever hands over the reward. So they push. They run through their techniques with their jaw clenched tight. They visualize while gritting their teeth. They speak affirmations like they're being scored on performance, like some invisible examiner is watching, checking whether their feeling is convincing enough to earn delivery. And then they can't understand why it feels like wading upstream, why the harder they try, the more depleted they become, why the thing they want keeps hovering just beyond reach, forever approaching but never quite landing, like a horizon that keeps its distance no matter how far you walk. Let me explain why that happens. Anxiety itself carries an assumption inside it. When you chase something with urgency, with desperation, with that frantic energy of someone trying to force a result, underneath all of it sits a quiet belief: this hasn't happened yet. That's the real message behind every anxious visualization, every affirmation spoken through gritted teeth, every technique performed out of lack. All of it is announcing loud and clear that the desire is still missing, still out of reach, still waiting somewhere out there to be earned or wrestled into being. And consciousness, the one true creative power in existence, doesn't respond to your performance. It responds to what you actually assume. It hears that message and with total neutrality gives you exactly what you're assuming. More absence, more not yet, more almost, but never quite. Because that's the truest, most consistent thing you're feeling underneath it all. So what's the way through this? It isn't passivity, it isn't apathy, it's not sitting in your chair doing nothing, waiting for your desires to show up on their own. The real answer is something far more demanding than striving ever was, and far more powerful too. It's relaxation. But not the kind of relaxation that belongs to someone who's given up, not the loose, checked-out indifference of someone who's decided nothing matters anymore. I'm talking about the relaxation that belongs to someone who simply knows. There's a distinct quality to the stillness of a person who genuinely knows something is true. Picture a woman in the early weeks of pregnancy. She can't see the baby yet. She can't feel any movement. To anyone looking at her from the outside, nothing appears to have changed at all. And yet she doesn't spend her nights wondering whether the baby will actually happen. She isn't performing rituals to make sure. It keeps developing. She isn't scanning for proof that something is forming inside her. She knows. And out of that knowing, she moves through her ordinary days with a settled, quiet confidence that doesn't need outside evidence to hold steady. The lack of visible proof doesn't rattle her in the slightest. Why would it? She's already certain of what's true. That's the exact state I'm pointing you toward. Not the frantic energy of hoping something works out, not the tiring performance of trying to believe hard enough, just the plain, grounded, almost unremarkable certainty of someone who has simply accepted something as fact. It is done, not going to be done, not on its way to being done, not something you're hoping will be done. Done, already complete, right now. And once you're holding that assumption, not through strain, but through real, settled inner acceptance, reality has no option left but to rearrange itself to match it. Now here's something that might push back against everything you've been taught. The world has trained you to be suspicious of ease. It's told you over and over, in 100 different ways, that anything worth having has to be hard to get. That struggle proves you're serious. That if something arrives easily, you probably didn't earn it, or it isn't real, or there's a catch waiting somewhere. So when someone tells you to relax, to let go, to stop fighting for it, something inside you tenses up and objects. It says, but if I stop pushing, everything will fall apart. If I stop worrying, I'm being careless. If I ease up, I'm quitting. I want you to look closely at that reaction, because what it's really saying is this: I don't trust the law. I believe my effort matters more than the creative power of consciousness itself. I believe my worry is actually accomplishing something. I believe that the moment I stop watching, stop controlling, stop pushing, the universe will simply lose track of me. Can you see how much authority that gives your doubt? Can you see how it puts your anxiety in the driver's seat? More influential than the law, more influential than your assumption, more influential than consciousness itself. This is the trap hiding inside the trap. The belief that struggle is required is the very thing standing between you and the effortless arrival of what you want. Because when you struggle, you're assuming lack, you're assuming resistance, you're assuming that having what you want is inherently difficult. And the law, which holds no opinion of its own and simply mirrors back your dominant inner state, gives you exactly that. A life where everything is hard to get, where nothing comes easily. Not because reality is built that way, but because that's what you've most deeply and consistently assumed it to be. So let me tell you what happens the moment you truly relax into the feeling of the wish already fulfilled. Not what I hope happens, what has to happen, by law. First, the conversation running through your mind changes. Right now, for most people, that inner voice sounds like someone managing an emergency. What if it never comes? What if I'm getting this wrong? What if I don't deserve it? What if I've missed my window? An endless loop of doubt and what-ifs humming underneath everything like a low fever that never breaks. But when you genuinely step into the state of the wish fulfilled, when you stop performing it and actually assume it's already done, that inner voice quiets down. Not because you force the doubt into silence, but because the doubt no longer has anything to stand on. That fearful loop, the one that keeps asking, what if it never comes, cannot keep running once you've genuinely accepted that it's already here. Fear needs the assumption of absence to keep itself alive. Take that assumption away, and there's nothing left for it to feed on. What replaces it is stillness, but not an empty kind of stillness. It's full, saturated with the reality of what you've already accepted, soaked through with the feeling of already having it. Second, your body shifts along with your mind. You already know what anxiety feels like physically. The tight chest, the shallow breathing, the clenched jaw, that restless hum of someone who is permanently braced for something to go wrong. That's the body of a person assuming danger, assuming lack, assuming the worst is still possible. But the body of someone who has genuinely settled into their assumption feels completely different. The breath deepens without you trying to deepen it. The shoulders drop on their own, the jaw releases, the eyes soften. There's a kind of presence there too, not zoning out, but truly arriving in the moment, which only happens once you're no longer bracing against some imagined future. And people pick up on this, even when they can't quite explain why. There's something magnetic about someone who is genuinely at peace with what they know. Not the smug peace of someone who thinks they're above others, but the quiet, grounded peace of someone who simply knows something to be true. Third, and this is the part the world likes to call miraculous, even though it's really just the law doing exactly what the law does, the world outside you begins to shift. Not always instantly, not always in ways you can see right away, but with a precision that, once you witness it happen in your own life, changes you permanently. A string of small coincidences starts to form a bridge. The right person shows up in a conversation you didn't plan for. The message arrives from a direction you never expected. The answer surfaces in a quiet moment instead of a moment of forcing. The situation shifts, not because you pushed it into place, but because you finally stopped pushing against it. And in that release, your assumption was finally free to move through the world unobstructed. Now let me address the objections some of you are already forming. But I can't just sit here and do nothing. I have responsibilities. I have things I need to take care of. I have a life to run. Of course you do, and I'm not telling you to stop acting. I'm asking you to change the inner place your actions are coming from. There's a kind of action that springs out of anxiety, out of that desperate, grinding energy of someone trying to force an outcome into existence. That kind of action wears you down. It's the sort of effort that drains you instead of energizing you, and it often produces results that then need to be propped up with even more effort, because they were built on the assumption of struggle, so struggle just keeps reproducing itself. Then there's a different kind of action, the kind that flows out of assumption, the natural, almost effortless movement of someone who already knows where they're headed and is simply walking there. This kind of action doesn't feel like straining, it feels like expression. The way a flower doesn't strain to open, it just opens, because that's the natural next step of what it already is. When you're genuinely living inside the state of the wish fulfilled, your actions take on a different quality altogether. They rise up naturally from within instead of being mechanically forced from outside pressure. You find yourself pulled toward making a certain call, sending a certain message, showing up in a certain place, not because you've calculated the perfect strategy, but because it simply feels like the natural thing for the person you're being right now to do. And what's interesting is that the results these actions produce are often wildly out of proportion to the effort you put in, because they're not being powered by anxiety, they're being powered by assumption, and assumption is a far more efficient engine than effort will ever be. Let me talk for a moment about the harvest. A farmer who plants a seed doesn't dig it back up every morning to check whether it's sprouted. He doesn't lose sleep wondering whether the seeds are growing beneath the soil. He doesn't run elaborate rituals over the field to try and speed up the process. He plants, and then he trusts. He moves through his days knowing, not hoping, not wishing, not performing certainty, but genuinely knowing that the harvest is coming. Because he understands that once a seed is in good soil, growth is no longer his job to manage. It becomes a matter of law, of nature simply doing what nature does once the right conditions have been met. Your assumption is that seed. Consciousness is the soil it's planted in. And the law, which has never once failed, which cannot fail any more than gravity could suddenly stop working, is the force that carries that seed forward into its harvest. Your only job isn't to make it grow. Your job is to leave it alone, to not dig it up out of impatience, to not disturb the soil with doubt, to not demand proof of a sprout before it's even had time to break through the surface. Your job is to plant with real assumption, not performed, not merely hoped for, but a genuine, settled, bone-deep acceptance of what you know to be true, and then to rest. To water that seed with your faith, to warm it with the steady confidence of a mind that doesn't need outside proof to know the harvest is on its way. And it will come, not because you earned it, not because you deserved it more than someone else, not because you performed every step of the technique flawlessly or believed with enough intensity, but simply because you planted the seed. And planting is always, always followed by harvest. That's the law, and the law does not fail. Now let me talk about the moments when everything seems to contradict what you're holding on to, because they will happen. You'll settle into this quiet, knowing state, and then something will occur that seems to fly in the face of all of it. The circumstances will feel loud. The evidence in front of you will press against your assumption with what feels like undeniable weight. And some old, deeply worn part of you will whisper, "See, you were foolish to believe this. Look at what's actually happening right now." In that moment, you'll be handed a choice. You can react. You can take the bait the appearance is offering. You can let what you're seeing decide what you're allowed to assume. You can drop the state altogether and slide back into the anxious grinding that at least feels like you're doing something productive. Or you can choose something far harder and far more powerful. You can stay. You can look directly at what appears to be contradicting you and say, quietly, privately, with the calm certainty of someone who understands exactly how the law operates, "This is old information. This is just the echo of a state I used to be in. This is not the force actively shaping my life right now. I see it. I acknowledge that it's there, and I choose not to let it dictate what I assume." Then you come back to the stillness, back to the knowing, back to the quiet acceptance of the wish already fulfilled. Not in a rush, not frantically. The return itself should feel relaxed, like gently refocusing your eyes after they've drifted. "Oh, I wandered off there. Here's where I actually am." And you settle back in. And the law, which never once stopped doing its work in the background, simply continues. Every single time you choose to stay in the state instead of reacting to the appearance in front of you, you're proving something profound to your own consciousness. You're showing it that your inner knowing means more to you than whatever your outer circumstances are showing you. And consciousness, taking note of that choice, lets the assumption sink in even deeper, more automatic, more woven into who you are, more completely yours. Until eventually, and this moment does come if you stay faithful, the appearances simply stop having any pull on you. Not because you've turned cold or indifferent, but because your inner knowing has become so solid, so settled, so entirely your home base, that the noise happening outside can no longer reach the place where you actually live. That's what real mastery looks like. Not some triumphant performance of a person who has defeated their doubt once and for all, but the quiet, unhurried stillness of someone who has simply outgrown their need for outside proof. There's a word I want to leave you with: Sabbath. In its oldest, deepest sense, Sabbath was never really about a day on the calendar. It's a state of consciousness. It's the sacred rest that follows completion, the stillness of that seventh day once the work of creation was finished. When the creative force looked at what had been made and called it good, it rested, not because there was nothing left to do, but because the inner work was already complete. The assumption had been made, the seed had been planted, the inner reality had been established, and what followed was rest. That's your invitation tonight, to step into your own version of that Sabbath, to look at your desire, your fulfilled state, the reality you've claimed within your own consciousness, and say, "It is done, it is finished, it is good," and then to rest there, without checking on it, without monitoring it, without strategizing or forcing or performing anything at all, simply resting in the knowledge that it's already complete. This isn't the rest of someone who's thrown in the towel. It's the rest of someone who has already done the only thing that ever needed doing. The internal shift, the acceptance of the ending, the assumption held with real, settled, peaceful conviction that the desire already exists as done within consciousness, and that consciousness is the only reality that actually matters. Everything else out there is simply the outer world catching up to what's already true within. So here's something practical for you to take with you tonight. Not a technique, just a question. How would I feel if I knew, without any shred of doubt, that what I want is already done? Not how would I feel if I saw the proof, not how will I feel once it finally shows up. How would I feel right now if I simply knew, the same way I know my own name, the same way I know what city I live in, that it's already complete in consciousness and therefore inevitable in form? Sit with that question, not to land on some clever intellectual answer, but to actually locate the feeling, the real felt sense of what that kind of knowing would be like inside your body, inside your breath, inside the quality of your own inner silence. And then, this is the whole thing, be that. Don't perform it, don't put it on display, simply be it. Let it shift your breathing, let it soften your jaw, let it slow your walk, deepen your voice, and quiet that urgency behind your eyes. Let the feeling of, "it's already done," become the atmosphere you carry with you, the air you're breathing, the quiet undercurrent beneath everything you do and say and think all day long. This isn't a technique you bolt onto your existing life. It's an identity you step fully into. The person who knows it's done carries themselves completely differently than the person who's still hoping it gets done. They're in the same body, facing the same circumstances, and yet they're living in two entirely different realities because they're holding two entirely different assumptions. And consciousness, the only true creative force there is, always delivers the physical match of whatever assumption you're most deeply, most consistently, most genuinely living from. I want to leave you with this. You are not here to earn your good. Let me repeat that, because so many of you have heard the opposite message so many times that it's become as invisible as water is to a fish. You are not here to earn your good. Your desires are not rewards handed out for sufficient effort. They're not prizes given to the most disciplined, the most faithful, the most deserving among us. They're not being held back by some cosmic gatekeeper weighing whether you're worthy yet. Your desires are revelations. They're precise, personal, intimate signs pointing to what already exists as your inheritance within consciousness. The moment a desire shows up inside you, it's because on some level, however faint, you already sense that this thing belongs to you, that it's already available to you, that somewhere within the infinite field of what's possible, this exact reality is calling out your name. Your task isn't to create it. It already exists. Your task is to claim it. And claiming has nothing to do with striving. It has nothing to do with performing. It doesn't look like gritting your teeth through a visualization practice while secretly terrified underneath that it won't actually work. Claiming looks like acceptance. Quiet, genuine, settled acceptance of the ending, of the fact, of what's already done. This is mine. I accept it as mine. It's done within consciousness, and so it must inevitably become done in physical form as well. Holding that acceptance with real conviction, returning to it faithfully whenever you drift, letting it become the quiet center of your inner life, that has always been the only real work required. Every technique, every method, every practice out there has only ever been a road leading back to this stillness, this knowing, this rest. So take a breath, let your shoulders drop, let your jaw release, let go of the need to force something into happening, to keep checking on its progress, to perform your faith flawlessly enough that the universe finally decides you've earned it. You already qualify, you always have. The desire sitting in your heart right now isn't a wish, it's a promise. And the only thing standing between you and that promise being fulfilled is your willingness to stop fighting your way toward it and simply open your hands and receive. It is done. Rest in that. Good evening. This has been Neville Voice. I'll see you in the next one.